What's going on, duelists? My name is Nick. I've been a retro Yu-Gi-Oh player for, call it, the last 10 years. Played Edison when it was current. I really enjoy GOAT format as well, and I dabble in Hat. I also have been playing Magic for the last 20 years, and so this is not to like throw credentials or something like some nerd on the table, but the reason that I'm mentioning this is game theory and being willing to sort of screw around with conventional wisdom, or at least understanding why it is indeed wise, is I think really important, and we're doing that here with Chainburn today. So I recently took Chainburn to my locals, where we have some really fantastic players that are, I would say, quite highly ranked in Tennessee, both in terms of modern Yu-Gi-Oh! As well as retro Yu-Gi-Oh! And I was able to go 4-0, which was awesome. I dropped a single game to Hero Frog. I played Gemini Stun. I also played against Dandy Quick Draw Warrior, and what else did I play? I'm blanking on it right now. It's going to come to me in a minute. But regardless, we cut top 4, and y'all are going to have a stroke, but I played a 42-card main deck. Let me be very clear. We are testing and trying new things, and some of those things are contingent on seeing each other in the main deck, very specifically in Game 1 situations. A large part of playing Chainburn is putting your opponent to the test as to their deck build's level of preparedness for something like Burn, and you could say the same for something like Empty Jar or Final Countdown or just rogue decks in general. So without further ado, let's sort of hop into the list. We have the Valleys. I think this was in Deej's original list, but I know Frog Slicer has been perhaps more active on the Discord and also is on the same mix of Battle Faders and Cyber Valleys. There's really not much to explain here. I think one thing worth mentioning with Cyber Valley is that don't be afraid to just stack a card on top of your deck. You could pitch like a Dead Allure, another Dead Battle Fader, something like that, by just normal summoning the Cyber Valley, and you could stack a Secret Barrel, adjust desserts, flip that Jar of Greed, and set your lethal trap one turn before it's potentially too late. So, shout-outs to Frog Slicer. The innovation on Jester Confit is huge. I know he plays 2. I know a lot of people that net deck the list tend to play 2, or they look very strangely at the card until they start to get to cast it. I've replaced 1 with the Gores. I'm a huge fan of Gores, and in general, just looking at the limited and restricted list in Edison, there are a number of cards with extremely extremely high floors and quite high ceilings. Chainburn is not a deck that most people will expect Gores out of, and all the better, Chainburn is a deck in Game 1 that your opponent may not know that you're on for the first couple of turns of the game, because Jar and Legacy are sort of everywhere. Reckless is in a fair amount of decks. If they see something like Dimensional Wall, that's sort of the writing on the wall. But what I'm trying to say here is that you can set 3 paths, and in response to an attack, chain all of your spells, drop a Gores on them, and put them immediately to the how confidently do you set your back row test. And if they set it quite confidently, you need to be aware of things like Dimensional Prison and Mirror Force. But beyond that, Gores tends to circumvent a lot of traditional outs to aggro. It is typically the largest monster on the board. In a very strange situation, you could even normal summon it if you're sitting on, stall. But one of the cuter things to do with Gores, it has a second ability. I don't know how many people know the hidden Easter egg on Gores, but if you take effect damage, sorry, I have an iPhone from like the Model T Ford era, Paleozoic era. If you take effect damage and your Gores qualifies for being summonable, you can drop the Gores and burn your opponent for that much. Now, how would that happen? If your opponent drops a Caius and goes to burn your Sangin or your Battle Fader, you could chain all of your back row and let that be the last creature, permanent, whatever terminology you want to use on the battlefield. Take your 1,000 off it being dark, drop a Gores, immediately put them to the test. Now, granted, you will not get the second body, but you deal the damage right away, which is quite important because you don't want the opponent having live Dimensional Prisons and Mirror Forces. That being said, if you feel more comfortable putting the Gores in the sideboard, by all means, go ahead. But Gores, I don't think it won me a game outright by itself, but it definitely got me halfway there in 2 different games across 2 different matches. I play a Sangin. This may look a little bit weird if you don't normally play Chainburn, but just understand that it's typically getting Cyber Valley or Battle Fader. It can get Jester Confit, and if you're confident in your opponent's in the read on the opponent's back row or lack of potential answers, if you've seen enough Raikos, then you can go get your Morphine Jar and just try to auto win on them. There's the Morphine Jar. I don't feel the need to explain this card. So I would say the 41st or 2nd card is the Marshmallow. And I'm definitely a sucker for trying to play all of the powered cards and understanding why they are truly on the limited and restricted list. Something to understand about Marshmallow is it's truly at its best in a Game 1 scenario. The reason being is a couple fold. One, my list is playing a single Caius in the main, so you have a little bit of an extra tribute fodder, you have extra Cyber Valley banish fodder, but finding burn wherever you can while specifically not dying is exactly what this deck wants to do, and playing too many copies of Lava Coup and Threatening Roar means that you will just do the not dying part, but you will not do the not getting there on burn part. I will say, if this card were at more than one, I probably wouldn't play more than one. You just don't want to clog them. Once the cat's out of the bag, they're not going to be swinging with a reckless abandon into the Marshmallow. And having reasonable sets where the opponent might still expect a Morphine Jar if they know you as a player are on chain burn regardless, you can at least throw away your Marshmallow into something like an Icarus Attack or a Gemini Spark. Or have your opponent set all of their back row. And then swing in and be disappointed by it being a Marshmallow, thereby opening up your Caius into their back row or something like this. The Jester Confit. So huge shout out to Frog Slicer. I questioned this initially, not saying that it's bad, but it's not, readily evident why it's in the deck whatsoever. Most people don't even know what this card does. If you're watching a Chain Burn deck profile, you probably do, but if you don't, pause and read if you can focus. I know I'm recording this with a sponge. But long story short is you can only control one, so it's kind of like 6 Sam Grandmaster. You could just special it. It must be an attack, and that's relevant for a number of reasons. At the opponent's end phase, if you still control the Jester Confit, the ability goes on the stack, you choose a monster that your opponent controls, and you bounce that and the Jester Confit to the respective opponents, to the respective hands. That's huge that you have main deck outs to things like Jinzo as it comes back to you. Outs to things like Android, outs to things like Catastor's not a huge problem, but it also combos quite well with Lava Golem. So, okay, this and the Marshmallow are the 41st and second card. And I'm going to try to keep this video as short as I can while still giving like an actual in-depth analysis instead of saying, well, you play 3 because it's super good, or you play 2 because 3/2's cloggy. I'm sorry, Yugi tubers, like sometimes the level of superficiality, just like my eyes roll so far in the back of my head that I can see what I ate for dinner last night. So I think what I'm trying to say is Lava Golem, at its core, is a card that you want before your opponent is siding for chain burn or even is aware that you're on chain burn. Now, Lava Golem in multiples is extremely dependent on play draw, and the reason for that being is in Edison, sets are quite prevalent. Set Hamster, set Raikou, even sometimes set Sangan. You used to see more set Gravekeeper Spy, set Lone Fire, etc. Dandelion, Dupe Frog, Treeborn, etc., etc., etc. Now, this card does a number of things. While this deck doesn't explicitly have to attack to win, and frankly, in Game 1, you're not going to be doing a ton of it without, maybe Gores or Sangan, you can still break Dupe Lock with Lava Golem, and you special the Lava Golem. You are unable to normal or set during that turn. So, don't think that you're going to get to go Lava Golem, set Morphine Jar, I'm so good. Also, I have English cards if people are going to decry, oh my god, you're playing the wrong cards. These are really cool, come on. Jester Confit with Lava Golem, you'll get them for the 1,000, and then likely just bounce your Lava Golem again. Really depends on what they put on the board. I believe you can target a set. Nope, you have to target a face-up monster. So that's not super relevant. We have Ceasefire to flip up sets if we're worried about value, but Lava Golem, it really only gets got by Torrential and Bottomless. You can't Mirror Force it, you can't Deprison it, and frankly, it's super awkward if your opponent finds themselves having to Raikou it, because that's one less Raikou pointed at a non-chainable trap or your set Morphine Jar, something of this nature. Now, when it comes to having multiple Lava Golems in your deck, you're both going to want to be on the read that your opponent doesn't have numerous answers to Lava Golem. That is important insofar as they have not seen the main deck Lava Golem, right? Like some really enfranchised players may think burn, Lava Golem, okay, cool, I have to be prepared for 3 Lava Golem, Gravity Bind, this, that, the other thing. Those cards are not meta in burn anymore. I mean, that's like stall burn, and that just gets broken the hell up by Gemspark, Icarus Attack, MST, Dust Tornado, all of that. But if your opponent, you got to kind of watch how they side. If they're bringing out a whole lot with haste, and then they're struggling to bring cards in, anticipate that those forces and those D-prisons, and if they haven't seen Lava Golem, especially those bottomlesses, are going to be coming out. Your Lava Golem could be safe. Matchups where I like the Lava Golem, Vayu Turbo, Heroes, Blackwings, you take them off of the requisite typing for them to use their archetype interaction cards like Spark and Icarus Attack. Machina, you could get those fortresses off the board after you're done dim walling them. And that brings me to another extremely important point. Jester Confit, Lava Golem, Match Made in Heaven, yes, they can bounce. Jester Confit also allows you to have a set, right? So you could have your set Marshmallow, and you could have your set Morphing Jar, and you have this weirdo Confit on the board just hanging out, irrespective of the Lava Golem. Now, it's typically going to magnetize attacks because it is a 0/0. It must come out in attack position. It's going to annoy your opponent by bouncing their creature for some amount of value for us, minus the just desserts. Why is that important? Well, your opponent can choose to attack into the Jester Confit, and although you could Magical Cylinder anything, typically if your opponent, if your monster's in attack mode or if you have a set, you're not going to receive a lot, if any, battle damage. You know, there's Bora, like there's Spear Dragon, I guess. But here, we can summon a Lava Golem, we can summon the Confit, we bait them into swinging into the Confit, we flip a Dimensional Wall. Dimensional Wall reads, the next time you would receive battle damage from an opponent's attacking monster this turn. It doesn't target, and also it works on non-direct attacks. So you're essentially opening up a conduit for your opponent to somewhat declare a direct attack on your 0/0. You get incredible value. You will lose your Jester Confit, but you may not have wanted to bounce the Lava Golem in the first place, instead choosing to keep your set Marshmallow, Sangin, Morphing Jar, a secret. So that's like my diatribe on Lava Golem specifically. I'm only playing the one. I don't really want to see two in my opening hand unless very specifically I'm aware that my opponent is on like Dragon Turbo. I got to get the Kawaki Miru Dracos out of the way, multiple red meds. I believe you can summon double Lava Golem within a turn. It's just very typically difficult to do, very specifically into like Dragon Turbo or like a very explosive value hand. Even some Lightsworn hands, you can get away with it. I'm playing a single Caius, and I think that, you know, conventional wisdom is like, well, Chain Burn is a burn deck. Why are you playing interactive cards? Well, Caius is the best card in Edison format, statistically speaking. Not to mention, at its floor, it is a dark. The true low floor of this card is it is the only monster in your hand. You are unable to summon it. You do not have Allure of Darkness. But read the tea leaves there. That means that you don't have other monsters in your hand even to set up, to protect, to tribute summon the next turn. So that means you have probably 5 traps, or like, you know, Scapegoat or Chain Strike or something like this, and that's good. The unfortunate part is you cannot sack a Scapegoat token to Caius someone, but whatever, we're only playing the one in the main, and that is in tandem with Brain Control. Another really insane tempo aggro card. We have 2 Chain Strikes, there's really nothing to discuss here, and Allure of Darkness. No matter what rarity I get this card in, just never really looks good. That's a shame. And Scapegoat. Scapegoat is one of those cards where it's like, it's very okay, right? It's almost like double Threatening Roar, very specifically when you would be direct attacked. And then people are going to scream like, oh my god, you're going to die to Bora over and over and over again. Well, we're playing triple Dim Wall and the Magic Cylinder. Cylinder doesn't matter, it could always negate an attack, but in the main, right? So a lot of the point of playing Chain Burn is really good understanding of fluidity between why you have your deck constructed in game 1, the pros and cons of play draw, and therefore going into game 2, hopefully not a game 3, but going into game 2 and game 3, why you should have certain cards, ideally in your opening hand or in your deck for the play draw scenarios. Now, cards like Scapegoat into something like Bora, or let's use the Spear Dragon example again, you have triple Dim Wall in the main. So as you move away from Dimensional Walls and Magic Cylinder, a lot of the time in the post-board situations, that's okay. You're also not going to keep a Scapegoat when you're repeatedly going to get pierced over. We have specific anti-Blackwing tech. But in a typical Game 1 Chain Burn plan, you're looking to not interact as much as possible, and in the instances where you are forced to interact, this is why I'm playing high-impact cards like Caius and Gors. Gors is also tribute fodder for Caius, I failed to mention that. And in a similar instance, Scapegoat will just buy you enough time very often to draw go, and stack your burn damage. My last spell is Brain Control. You have to be a little bit careful of getting too low on life that you could still Brain Con, but at the end of the day, we have just a Caius. You could do some insane shit with like Lava Golem, someone's board away, Brain Con it, 3k them, pass it back, 1k them. You have a Dim Wall. You could even, throw the Jester Confit out there as well. Brain is also just simply a tempo card. Give me your absolute 0. I'm beating your ass. Give me that Dupe Frog. I'm breaking the lock. Give me that red med. I'm crashing it into your red med. Or give me the Blue Eyes White Dragon. I'm swinging it over the red med. There's a number of things you can do here. Then there are burn cards. Let's not explain the burn cards. I mean, like, we can go into the nuances if y'all super want, but you clicked this video for a reason. These dim walls are so cool, and frankly, one of my favorite cards in the whole deck. I know that Frog Slicer, as well as a couple of others, are really not fond of the non-chainables. I will mention this now. In certain matchups, I don't bring them all out, right? In certain matchups, I'll actually keep like one dim wall, one cylinder. Those will tend to be things like Dragon Turbo, not really as much Blackwing because of the fear of Icarus, although they like a mediocre Blackwing player is just going to like salivate at the juicy goat token or the Battle Fader or something like this. They may Book of Moon a Cyber Valley and then just load up the Bora and go for it. Well, surprise, your piercing turns into your detriment. Accumulated Fortune is, quite frankly, one of the best reasons to play this deck. I'm really sad this card is only a common. Reckless. So, if you know Reckless, then you know that ideally you want to use this card as late as possible. People call it a skill card all the time. I think it really just boils down to like knowing how much danger you are in if your Reckless is mediocre and being patient enough to flip 2 Recklesses at the same time. But you also have to be aware that if you're going to be chaining Accumulated Fortune and Chain Strike, that you have enough unique names that while flipping double Reckless, you can still resolve your Chain Strike and Accumulated Fortune. Let's also just quickly say this. If you really know, then, fine. But if you don't, let's say the chain is, I don't know, Heavy Storm on your opponent's side, chain Jar of Greed, chain, I don't know, Legacy of Yatagarasu, chain Accumulated Fortune, and then chain another Accumulated Fortune. You can do that. The second Accumulated Fortune, think of it, you're standing in place, you just spin around and you look back at the chain. It does not itself understand that it is an Accumulated Fortune that will, well, it does, but it doesn't matter, it's looking backwards. So the third Accumulated Fortune would not be good. It's looking backwards at 2 copies of left to resolve accumulateds, but the second one is eligible to be put on the stack, and it will resolve as long as nothing else happens. No trap stun, no sad times. No trap stun, no cry. So, Legacy. Legacy is objectively just better than Jar. I don't have, I do have 1 Spirit in my list. I don't have any creature swaps at this point in time. I'm like really considering 1 Azora Priest in this list, as well as like, not in the main, in the side, as well as like maybe 1 to 2 creature swaps to deal with dandy tokens, and then swap away the Azura Priest for Amaryllis, and then end your turn, or sorry, for Titaniel, possibly an Amaryllis, and then end your turn and bounce your Azura Priest. That is incredible value, and sometimes you'll be able to resolve a Pot of Greed with Legacy of Yatagarasu. Another weird card that I actually think could make some amount of sense in Chainburn out of the board is Dark Dust Spirit. For comparable reasons to Caius, it clears the entire Amaryllis board all at once. And Amaryllis will put you under so much pressure while also still having back row destruction through Lila, MST, True Nade, if they play it, just to push for game. And Raikou, that you have to be careful of just using conventional means to not die to them. Now, Dark Dust Spirit will deal with everything that's face up, and you could deal with that which is face down after. Typically, set monsters are not super aggressive. We don't care as much. That being said, Dark Dust Spirit is, probably just always worse than Caius, as it is not Omni removal, but the creature swap spirit package in consideration with Yata is something that is probably too cute to be good, but definitely something to think about because this deck operates on high card volume. You want to see as many cards as possible, not necessarily only specific cards, because you do need a high card volume to often start your own chains and get up to Chain Link 4 to resolve an Accumulated Fortune, and hopefully more than that for a very large Chain Strike. So that being said, I'm playing 2, and I'm playing 2. I will often side 1 and 1 out if I find so much to come in beyond the dim walls and the cylinder coming out. It really depends on how much spot removal your opponent is running. Then I had to make room somewhere so as to not play like a 44 or 45 card deck. So we've cut down to a single Threatening Roar and a single Waboku. I may rustle some Jimmies here. By the way, the rest of the deck is just the 1-ofs. I may rustle some Jimmies. Waboku is objectively the better card. And oh my god, you can't threaten, you can Threatening Roar, and then your opponent doesn't get to have a battle at all. Unless you're specifically worried about Gladiator Beasts, and even then, what are they doing? They counter a monster effect, I guess. But Waboku can be used on your own turn to build chain links, and it could even be used in tandem with bluffs. Like, you could just swing your Sangan into something. bait out the D prison. Know that your Caius is going to be good for later after it banishes a monster and swings into the back row. If you don't want that Sangan to die as you want it to be tribute fodder, then flip your Wabaku. I know that's kind of like very specific, but the fact that the baseline principle is Wabaku is more chainable than Threatening Roar is, and so why would you not want to be able to use it aggressively to finish the game with Chain Strike? And like I said, these are the one-ofs. Ojama Trio was incredible all day for me yesterday. Man, what was that other matchup that I played? Played Hero Frog, Gemini, Quick Draw Dandy Warrior. I'm blanking so hard right now. Oh, Dragon Turbo, duh. Yeah, Ojama Trio was kind of wild into Dragon Turbo until Joaquin Mirror Drago came down in game 2, and I was like super, super sad, but I was able to snap it off in the first game. Really clog up their board. They had red meds. Okay, I have dim wells and magic cylinders. Extra deck, it's a formality, kind of. You're not going to make almost anything. Well, you don't have tuners on your own. You need Chimera Tech. You could play the second one if you really want. The rest of this is my Frog Monarch extra deck, so it really doesn't matter. The Armory Arm will come up from time to time because you can Brain Con, Gale, or Junk Synchron, something of this nature that's level 3. Excuse me. And maybe I should, for that reason, also throw a Drill Warrior in here for the times that you take a Quick Draw Synchron. But yeah, you could make Armory Arm, and Burn is important. You have 6 level 1s right off the top of... Oh, no, 7 with Jester Confit. So, yeah, sometimes you'll be able to make it. You are not going to make Colossal Armory Arm anytime soon, but, yeah, just worth knowing. I don't know, just good outs. Like I said, sometimes you will steal a tuner, and that's that. Boom. Side deck. This is where it gets real spicy, and frankly, I think all of the theory really starts to come together, and that makes me super happy. So, to start off, we have triple Sirocco. I will say, if I owned a Gale, I would play a Gale. I do not own a Gale. I would not only play the Gale for the Blackwing matchup in tandem with Sirocco, scoop up everything, and then half something's attack and just swing real big, but also Gale just single-handedly halves Jinzo and Vanity's Fiend, just as a normal summon. It could also half your Lava Golem, and while it gets beat over by the Lava Golem, it's not as threatening to get Lava Golemed over and over, and you could protect your Gale and continue to have things to where they cannot run over the Gale. Now, granted, you don't want the Lava Golem to be able to be run into the Gale. You could throw it into defense mode at that point in time if it's halved it twice, but I'm talking a lot about a card that I don't own, but I would very graciously accept a Gale and play it if I had one. 2 more Caiuses. Caius is Omni removal. There are very few matchups where this card does not come in, and primarily the reason why you do not main it is you don't want the opponent to be siding for Caius. Things like Shadow Imprisoning are like not great against this deck, but also not awful at the same time. You don't want my Caius to... I don't want my Caius to just be a 24 vanilla, and I don't want my opponent to reasonably detect that their generic card is actually good against Chainburn if they are packing a Shadow Imp Mirror. So, we also have the double Sidra. Yes, Chimera Tech. We want to get it. We want to get Fortress off the board. Got to be a little bit careful not to leave this one on the board with Cyber Valley. But you know, if it's on the board with Cyber Valley and it has nothing to do, you could either just contact, or you can use Cyber Valley to send it away with his little bit brother, big brother sort of dynamic duo. But typically, this card is in here for Jinzo. This card also is very often looked at as a beat stick against things like Hero, and sometimes Blackwing, and I guess it beats over a lot of the typical shit in Frogs. It's fine insofar as it could also be Caius tribute fodder, but I'm really not like super excited to bring it in for the purpose of being a beat stick. I'm happy that if it goes the distance, but I don't have extremely high expectations of it beyond being a removal spell. That said, if you do run into Machina, you're golden, right? Like, you make a gigantic Chimera Tech, you could just keep stalling them out with Wabakus and Battle Faders and Magic Cylinder and Threatening Roar, Jester Confit to bounce things that matter, and then eventually you can Chimera Tech them, and it's gigantic. Double Breaker. So we do need further, like, non-MST Royal Tribute hate. Another reason why I like this card is, I mentioned earlier, you're going to see the opponent bring out like Mirror Force. They might bring out Torrential. It's not entirely clear because they could just normal and then Torrential their own guy to kill a Morphine Jar under desperate scenarios. But Breaker ultimately is there to kill Royal Tribute and force things like Trap Stun out of Glad Beasts. I guess if you see X Sabers, any OTK deck that is like particularly interested in like Trap Stun, Cold Wave, True Nade, the Trap Stun portion is far more relevant to us. Of course, Cold Wave can suck as well, but we're playing Battle Fader, so okay. And then I've got a bunch of 1-0s. So we've got Lily and the next Lava Golem. So the next Lava Golem I'll talk about, I already really talked about it. Like, it's really play draw. You want this card when you're on the draw typically. It comes down faster. And it tends to come in matchups where the beat sticks are like really huge, and also you don't expect them to have a lot of spot removal. So that'll typically be Dragon Turbo. It can be Blackwing. I fear the Icarus every day. You know, most people will side out their Solemn Judgments against Burn. If they're down really bad, they might keep it in, and you also have to respect that anything can get Solemned when they're already quite low on life. But in general, your Lava Golem will be taking Wing Beasts off the board, and you'll probably be okay. The other application can be against Vayu Turbo. It's also fairly decent against heroes, both to take Gemspark off the table, but also to remove Absolute Zero. And your board is going to get Regeki'd anyway, but the Lava Golem is going to stick around. The Lily's super cool. It beats over, I mean, even just yesterday, it beat over Vanities, and then my opponent had to swing Swap Frog into it to force me to activate Lily so that on my following turn, I couldn't Lily them directly and pump for game, which to me should have indicated that they did not have Gores. Instead, I Brain Con, took their Android, beat them with both of the things, and then normal summon my Caius and just burn them to death. If you're not aware, Caius can, anything that banishes any dark monster, it doesn't matter if it's yours or it's theirs, it's always going to be 1,000 damage. So Caius is true floor when it's summonable, and that summon is not negated. It's 1,000 damage, and your normal summons are not ultra important in the main, which is why I like the one Caius. But as you go into the side deck, I mean, look at what we got here. A fair amount of it is special summon, right? You have double Sidra, you have the Lava Golem, and the Sirocco is not a special, but it could be a tributeless normal. But we do bulk up on normal summons. That is primarily due to battle traps coming out. That's also due to like air coming out, like things like Jar of Greed and Legacy, because like, why should they build my chain links for me for free? So yeah, like the Lily, it was really good for me. I don't know if I would want a second one, because I don't particularly understand how this card is getting outed in a game 2, game 3 situation conventionally. It's going to typically be Icarus, and I don't know if I'm bringing in against Blackwing. I don't really think so. But yeah, the last monster, well, we'll save that for last. Beyond that, we have Space, Decree, Heavy, Decree, Dust Tornado. Dust Tornado is really cool. I think I would cut the second breaker for Gale, but there is a consideration to cut the second breaker to just have Dust Tornado, because play draw dependent, yes, but you can Dust Tornado as a chainable, and then use the hidden mode to just set your burn for your coming turn. And that can be important if you can present lethal with the burn proactively on your turn, but you want to shelter the burn in your hand. Dust Tornado is also kind of cute. You can get around, to my understanding, you get around Trap Dust Shoot, resolve a Dust Tornado, blow something up, or even target the face-up Trap Dust Shoot, set a card, it fizzles, not being able, I believe, I could be wrong on that, but, just worth mentioning. I'm not thrilled about this as an answer for specifically Royal Decree, but bringing in more MSTs that are inherently chainable to end phase things like Trapped Stuns. Like, there are only so many sets that should matter game 2 and 3 if you have physically seen your opponent's side, and this is why I'm a big proponent of physical Yu-Gi-Oh! Yeah, I feel like I'm spending a long time on Dust Tornado. Lastly, this is super spicy. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to everyone, but I am exploring it, and it's been putting up some pretty decent results, is Yamato Dragon. So, I'm playing BrainCon. I have triple Battle Fader. I have Waboku and Threatening Roar to prevent my things from dying, conventionally at least. I have Magic Cylinder as a negate attack, and I also have Jester Confit as well as Gores. Most of those cards don't leave the main. Like, it really depends. But again, this is like the ultimate belief in the theory that it is good for your opponent to remove battle traps in general against burn, but they should be doing it if they see you siding a lot as the burn player. If they see you not going to board a lot, and they've seen a lot of your deck as you have, because chain burn draws a lot of cards, they should understand that, well, if they are siding a lot, they may be bringing in attackers, right? Things like Fairy Injection Lily and Lava Golem, well, it's not an attacker, but you get my point, are creatures. They are known to be known entities in Chainburn. Yamato Dragon is not a known entity. And I am not above just setting this card, tribute setting this card, and saying, in a resigned manner, set Gores, I guess, and then they run into your Yamata, and you have your one-sided Morphine Jar, where you're not discarding, you're just drawing up to 5. This card can be cool with creature swap. It's not super necessary. I think we're going a little too far at that point. But all in all, I think this deck is extremely underrated. This is also my commentary before Chainburn just took down the really large Arkansas event. So, call me a bandwagoner if you like. I've been interested in Chainburn since I was like a really terrible teenage Yu-Gi-Oh player. And the deck has come a long way in terms of the innovation, mostly happening in the sideboard. That all being said, some things that I would think about playing. I don't have every idea in front of me. I know people have talked about Torrential Tribute. It's like okay. In a sense, it's a stall card. Like when we're boarding, we tend to bring in creatures. So I don't know, maybe you'd main it. I'd probably main it over like a Lava Golem at that point. It's in a sense chainable, but not really. Solemn out of the board. This is something that can be pretty good against like Jinzo, Vanity's Fiend, Decree. I mean, it's an Omni answer. You could Solemn as well, but I really don't expect Solemn to be in the opponent's deck post board. But if you get got, it's going to be real bad by a Solemn if they're already low. I mentioned Creature Swap. That's a real answer to things. This is also kind of interesting. Offerings to the Doomed. It is a chainable that you can activate under Reckless to avoid the downside of Reckless, as it does not stack. It's just you're already doing it. Offerings Jinzo, Vanities. You can offerings the Lava Golem if finally it would be too much for you and you don't want to die to your own Lava Golem. You could chain it to a Light and Darkness Dragon, which is definitely can present a real issue for this deck. Yes, you could put it all on the same chain, but at the end of the day, you're going to be throwing away like a Jar of Greed at best into Light and Darkness Dragon. It's just not usually where you want to be. And what else? Smashing Ground. It's not a trap. It can out things like Jinzo and Vanities. Not as good at outing Lad, but can start a chain nonetheless. So those are kind of like my immediate thoughts on Chainburn. In terms of like really unconventional things that you could do, I think you could look to Side-Winged Rhinos if you're super into the beatdown plan, but its stat line I don't think is attractive enough for us to warrant that slow of a beat stick to continually use that normal summon. But if you wanted to go like full dick and balls ham, you could bring in the Winged Rhinos with Ultimate Offering and just play it again out on your opponent's turn. Keeping in mind Ultimate Offering, I believe, does not start a new chain. Gotta double check that. But Granmole is also an out that you can bring in against things like Android. For that matter, you could also just play the second Jester Confit. So I hope that some of these musings have been helpful. I'm not by any means saying that this is like a solved deck or it's definitively tier 1 or 2 or anything like that. But I think if the format continues to disrespect Chainburn, Dragon Turbo tends to play one prime material. Sometimes Frogs play Jinzo. Sometimes, low trap count decks will play Jinzo. Decree is more common. Well, we know what entities can destroy us, Lad as well. Also why I really like Lava Golem into Lad, depending on if they have another thing. The beauty of Chainburn is I think the more that you study the format, the more that you could analyze the gaps of interaction and then plan for those gaps in interaction as you side for the opponent's sideboard. And the cool thing about Burn is like there's the sort of mix up that once your opponent sees a lot of your tech, you could just shuffle your whole 15 sideboard in, side back out, so your opponent has really no idea how much you've sided or not sided, and they're kind of lost. Like, how much more tech is there? Did they bring it out? And that unless they're siding super fast and confidently cards in, there's not going to be a ton of mainstay cards that absolutely windmill dunk on us. Again, Vanities for things like Lava Golem and Cyber Valley. You could also just normal a Jester Confit, so it's not a huge deal. Cyber Dragon, sorry, I meant. Battle Fader and Lava Golem are the big ones for Vanities. Gores as well. You got to be careful of Caius can get you pretty low. There's a fair amount of darks in our deck, but also false sense of security because you could like hold your dim walls and your cylinders for once you've seen a Caius. Do not allow them to get the swap frog loop off. And just be careful when you're using things like Morphine Jar with your Ceasefire. If you're playing against heroes, I would bring your Ceasefire out, as I did against Gemini. By the time that they're, like Gemini uses Ultimate Offering, they're already paying life to make them affect creatures. It's like not really worth the squeeze for Ceasefire, especially with Gem Sparks and stuff in the deck. Like they could get you end step. Anything else? No, I think that's about it. This has been a really long video, but I hope that some of these thoughts have been helpful. I would recommend playing Chainburn if you'd like the opportunity to study the opponent's deck and the format while just objectively knowing what yours is supposed to do, and you enjoy attacking the game on an angle that's a bit unconventional. All that being said, you have to have a bit of a thick skin. People are going to be extremely salty. Thankfully, I see my friends every week, and they're really good sports about it. But yeah. So my name has been Nick. I hope that this has been helpful. Thank you to the Edison Discord. Thank you to Frog Slicer and Deej and a couple of others. Catch you next time.